I ran to the hospital for my son. The phone call came at exactly 3:47 a.m., cutting through Phoenix's desert silence like a scream. Rachel's voice shaking. "Wesley, there's been an accident. Jake's at St. Mary's ICU. You need to come now." Car accident. Head trauma. Not conscious. I threw on clothes and raced through empty streets, my heart hammering against my ribs. 35 years as a Phoenix cop had taught me that 3:47 a.m. calls never bring good news. But this wasn't about the job anymore. This was about Jake. My boy, my only family left since cancer took Margaret. 23 minutes later, I burst through St. Mary's hospital doors, running past the emergency desk, taking stairs two at a time because waiting for elevators felt like surrendering precious seconds of my son's life. A nurse grabbed my arm just as I reached the ICU entrance. Middle-aged woman, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, name tag reading Linda Bennett, RN. Her grip was firm, urgent, stopping me dead in my tracks. "Mr. Parker?" She glanced around nervously, then pulled me aside. "Before you see him, just hide and wait," she whispered, her voice carrying 25 years of hospital experience. "Watch. Listen. Something's not right." Her fingers pressed against my forearm like she was trying to transfer her concern directly through my skin. In 3 decades of police work, you learn to read people. Linda Bennett wasn't the type to create drama where none existed. She guided me to a chair partially hidden behind a medical supply cart, positioned where I could see into room 314 through the glass partition, but remain unseen myself. Through the window, I caught my first glimpse of Jake in 2 months. Tubes running from his mouth, machines beeping in mechanical rhythm, his face pale against white sheets. Rachel sat beside him, holding his hand in what appeared to be perfect spousal devotion. But Linda Bennett had just activated every cop instinct I'd developed over 35 years. So I hid, and I waited, and I watched. 3 days later, I froze when I overheard my daughter-in-law saying words that would turn my blood to ice. I was walking back from the cafeteria when voices carried from the family conference room. Rachel's voice, but nothing like the grief-stricken wife she'd been performing for everyone else. "How much longer do we have to wait?" Cold, calculating, impatient, a man's voice responded. "Dr. Torres, Jake's attending physician. The father is being stubborn about the life support decision. Then we need the alternative plan we discussed." I pressed myself against the wall, 35 years of surveillance training taking over. "I can adjust his medication tonight," Torres continued. "Make it look like natural complications from the head injury." "How long?" 6 to 8 hours. His breathing will become shallow, then stop. We'll document it as expected progression of traumatic brain injury. "And the insurance payout?" "Clean death from documented medical complications. No questions asked. The $1.8 million should be processed within 30 days. My daughter-in-law and my son's doctor were planning to murder Jake for his life insurance money, and they were planning to do it that night. But I was also a father looking at his unconscious son, and the part of me that wasn't a cop desperately wanted to believe in random tragedies rather than calculated murder. The problem was, after 35 years of police work, I'd learned to trust the ice water feeling. It was never wrong. 3 days after the accident, Rachel gave me Jake's apartment keys. We were standing in the ICU family lounge, surrounded by vending machines and inspirational posters about healing and hope. "Maybe you could pick up some of his things. Books, photos, his favorite coffee mug, anything that might help when he wakes up." She emphasized the when slightly, like someone working hard to project optimism. Jake's apartment sat in a complex built during Phoenix's 1990s boom. Stucco walls, red tile roofs, and desert landscaping that required minimal water. I'd helped him move in 2 years ago, back when he and Rachel were newly married, and everything seemed perfect. The apartment still smelled like my son, coffee grounds and the leather conditioner he used on his motorcycle jacket, mixed with whatever fancy candles Rachel preferred. I wasn't looking for evidence. Not consciously. I was looking for connection, for pieces of Jake to hold on to while machines kept him breathing. His laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, screen dark but power light still glowing. Jake was meticulous about his computer, a trait he'd inherited from me. He always shut down completely when finished working, paranoid about security and battery life. But the power light was on, indicating sleep mode rather than shutdown. I touched the trackpad and the monitor flickered to life. The browser was still open. What I saw made my blood turn to ice water, then to something colder than ice, something that felt like the absolute zero of space. Search history, time-stamped 14 days before the accident. How to disconnect life support legally, Arizona. When can spouse make medical decisions, unconscious patient? Arizona laws. Terminal care decisions, next of kin. How long before brain death officially declared? Life insurance payout, medical death versus accidental death. The searches had been made at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, but according to Rachel's story, she'd only started learning medical terminology after the accident. With hands that shook like I had Parkinson's, I took photos with my phone, capturing each timestamp, each search query, each piece of evidence that my son's wife had been researching his murder weeks before attempting it. Then I copied the browser history to a USB drive I found in Jake's desk drawer, watching the files transfer with agonizing slowness. Every kilobyte was potentially evidence of premeditated murder, but it got worse, much worse. I scrolled further back. 3 weeks before the accident, life insurance payout timeline after death, natural versus accidental. 4 weeks back. Untraceable ways to cause car accidents. 5 weeks. How to fake grief convincingly. My son hadn't searched for these things. Jake was researching renewable energy systems for his engineering company, solar panel efficiency, wind turbine placement, battery storage technology. His legitimate search history was all professional development and industry news. Someone else had used his laptop. Someone who had regular access to his home. Someone with intimate knowledge of his schedule, his habits, his computer passwords. Someone planning his death with the methodical precision of a military operation. I saved everything to multiple backups. USB drive, emailed to my secure personal account, uploaded to cloud storage with timestamp documentation. Chain of custody was crucial now. Every piece of evidence needed verification, authentication, legal admissibility. As I sat in Jake's kitchen, staring at a screen that detailed the planned murder of my son with the casual thoroughness of a shopping list, one truth crystallized. This wasn't random. This wasn't passion-driven. This wasn't even a crime of opportunity. This was cold, calculated, premeditated murder, planned with the patience and precision of someone who killed for money. St. Mary's Hospital keeps digital records for everything. Every medication administered, every vital sign checked, every medical decision made. 35 years of working with hospital staff during investigations had taught me that medical professionals are obsessively meticulous about documentation, especially when liability or malpractice might be involved. I had legitimate access as next of kin, but I also had old friendships in Phoenix's medical community. Dr. Sarah Chen in administration had worked with Phoenix PD on dozens of cases involving medical evidence, domestic violence injuries that told stories, accident victims whose wounds didn't match their explanations, elderly patients whose natural deaths needed closer examination. Wesley, I'm so sorry about Jake. Of course I'll help with whatever you need. What I needed was to understand why Jake's medical record showed 3 different versions of his admission timeline, and why someone with administrative access had been making changes to his file every day since admission. Dr. Bai. Chen pulled up Jake's file on her secure terminal, the screen filled with medical abbreviations and timestamps that told the story of my son's fight for life. Let me walk you through what we have. Initial admission record, 2:15 a.m., severe head trauma, patient unconscious at scene, transported by Phoenix Fire Department paramedics. But as I watched her scroll through the file, I caught something that made me lean forward like a bloodhound catching a scent. Can you show me the metadata on that entry? The what? The file properties, digital forensics, when it was created, when it was modified, who made the changes. She clicked through several screens, her expression growing increasingly confused. That's very odd. This entry shows it was last modified at 8:30 a.m. the day after admission, But why would someone change an admission record after the fact? Show me what was changed. The revision history revealed the truth like a crime scene photograph. Original entry: patient regained consciousness briefly during transport, spoke coherently to paramedics, asked about wife's condition and requested father be contacted. Modified entry: patient unconscious throughout transport and initial assessment. No verbal response to stimuli. Someone had systematically removed evidence that Jake had been awake, alert, and talking after the accident. Someone with system access had eliminated proof that Jake might remember what really happened in those crucial moments. Someone had erased evidence that Jake might have seen who was really driving the car. Dr. Chen, who has authorization to modify patient records in your system? Only the attending physician and senior nursing staff in that department. She paused, studying the screen with growing concern. Wesley, this is highly irregular. Medical records should never be altered like this, unless there's a documented error that needs correction. I photographed the screen showing both versions, making sure timestamps and user modification logs were visible. Then I asked for printed copies of the complete file revision history, officially signed and dated by Dr. Chen, as the hospital's records administrator. The evidence was building like a prosecutor's dream case. Premeditation documented in digital searches. Planning revealed through insurance modifications. And now active cover-up involving someone inside the hospital's medical system. Someone who knew hospital procedures intimately. Someone with access to medical record systems and patient information. Someone like a nurse who worked in ICU and understood exactly how to manipulate medical documentation. Following someone in Phoenix requires patience, good hydration, and respect for the desert sun that punishes surveillance mistakes. The heat turns cars into ovens and transforms parking lots into furnaces. But it also provides excellent sight lines when you position yourself correctly. I'd been watching Dr. Kevin Torres for 4 nights, using skills I'd developed during decades of surveillance work. Staying back, varying routes, never getting too comfortable with patterns. He had evening rounds at St. Mary's, but afterwards he drove to places that had nothing to do with medicine. Night 1, Casa de Fuego restaurant, expensive dinner alone while reading what looked like financial documents. Night 2, First Phoenix Bank, late night ATM withdrawal of $500. Night 3, Desert Diamond Casino. He parked his BMW under a light, no attempt at concealment, confident, careless. Why wouldn't he be? He was just a respected physician unwinding after stressful days saving lives. I waited in my truck, positioned to observe the parking lot, and took photos with a telephoto lens, old habit from police surveillance work, license plates, timestamps, facial recognition shots that would hold up in court. Timestamp, 9:47 p.m. At 10:15 p.m., another car pulled up beside his BMW, Rachel's silver Honda Civic. They talked for 43 minutes. I captured images of both vehicles, license plates clearly visible, body language that suggested intimate familiarity rather than professional consultation. This wasn't doctor and patient's family member. This wasn't medical discussion about treatment options. This was personal, intimate, conspiratorial. When Rachel opened her car door to leave, the interior light illuminated her face for just a moment. She was smiling. Not the strained, worried smile of someone dealing with a family medical crisis, but the relaxed, satisfied expression of someone whose plans were proceeding exactly on schedule. Dr. Torres handed her something. Envelope, small package, cell phone. I couldn't tell from my position. But she tucked it into her purse with the casual motion of familiarity, like this was routine rather than emergency. I followed Torres inside the casino, using techniques I'd learned during undercover work. Stay back, blend in, become invisible. The casino was perfect for surveillance. Dim lighting, security cameras focused on gambling tables rather than observers. Enough ambient noise to mask movement. Kevin Torres was a high-stakes poker player with terrible judgment and worse luck. Over 3 hours, I watched him lose $3,200 in cash, money he clearly couldn't afford to lose. The way he played suggested desperation, chasing losses, betting aggressively on weak hands, making emotional decisions rather than mathematical ones. A man in serious gambling debt makes compromises. A doctor with access to life support systems and powerful medications could make those compromises profitable. A physician who controlled patient care decisions could turn medical authority into murder weapon. I documented everything. Casino surveillance cameras that would have recorded their meeting, his gambling losses tracked by dealer chips and credit markers, the exact timing that placed them together while Jake lay unconscious in Torres's ICU. But it was the next morning's discovery that confirmed my worst fears and completed the picture of conspiracy. I checked Jake's medical chart through the patient portal. Dr. Kevin Torres had been assigned as his attending physician the day after admission, transferred from Dr. Williams, who had handled Jake's initial treatment. The same day Rachel met him in a casino parking lot. The same day Jake's medical records were modified to remove evidence of consciousness. The same day someone started planning the medical murder of my son. Phoenix Federal Credit Union has been handling Parker family finances for 18 years, since Jake opened his first checking account with money from his summer job at 16. Jennifer Walsh, the branch manager, remembered helping Jake apply for his first car loan when I co-signed at 18% interest. Highway robbery, but necessary for building credit. Mr. Parker, I'm so sorry to hear about the accident. How can I help you today? I need to understand Jake's financial situation. Insurance policies, beneficiaries, any recent changes to his accounts. What she showed me made my stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. Jake's life insurance policy had been increased from the original $500,000 to $1.8 million just 6 months ago. A massive increase that would have required medical exams, financial justification, and significant premium increases. The beneficiary designation had been changed on the same day, from Wesley Parker father to Rachel Parker spouse. $1.8 million. Enough money to disappear forever. Enough to pay off serious gambling debts. Enough to start a new life in a country without extradition treaties. Enough motive for murder. Did Jake come in personally to make these changes? Jennifer pulled up the signature cards and account modification records. Actually, no. Mrs. Parker came in with a notarized power of attorney for medical and financial decisions. Said Jake was traveling extensively for work projects and couldn't handle it personally. She showed me the documents. Jake's signature on the power of attorney looked wrong. I'd seen my son's handwriting thousands of times. Birthday cards, college applications, thank you notes to his grandmother. This was close, skilled forgery, but the pressure points were wrong and the J in Jake had a slight hook that Jake never used. Can I get copies of these documents? Of course. And Mr. Parker? Jennifer lowered her voice, glancing around to ensure privacy. I have to tell you, it seemed unusual. Most couples handle major financial decisions together, especially something this significant. When someone increases life insurance by over $1 million, there are usually extensive discussions about premiums, medical exams, future planning. But Rachel handled everything alone? She seemed very knowledgeable about the process, like she'd researched it thoroughly beforehand. I drove directly to Jake's insurance agency. Western States Insurance had handled Parker family policies since Margaret and I bought our first house in 1987. Car insurance, homeowners coverage, Margaret's life insurance that helped me survive financially after cancer took her. Agent Michael Morrison pulled up Jake's file with obvious discomfort. Wesley, I have to be honest. I had concerns about this policy change. The increase was substantial, and Jake seemed different when he signed the papers. Different how? Nervous, distracted, like he wasn't really paying attention to what he was signing. Usually when someone increases coverage that dramatically, they ask detailed questions about premiums, terms, conditions, medical exam requirements. Jake just signed wherever Rachel pointed and left. Morrison showed me the application, but what really bothered me was when Mrs. Parker called 2 days later, asking specific questions about the claims process. How quickly benefits would be paid out after death. What documentation would be required. Whether accidental death versus natural death made any difference in payout timeline. 2 days after signing the policy, 4 weeks before the accident, She'd been researching the murder while Jake was still attending barbecues and playing softball on weekends. I had Morrison make copies of everything: the original application with Jake's questionable signature, the beneficiary change forms, phone logs showing Rachel's inquiries about claims processing, the medical exam results that showed Jake in perfect health. The financial motive was clear, documented, and overwhelming. The timeline proved premeditation with calendar precision. The insurance company had inadvertently documented the planning phases of my son's murder. All I needed now was proof of how they planned to carry it out. Phoenix is a deceptive city. Millions of people spread across desert valleys, but neighborhoods function like small towns where everyone knows everyone else's business. News travels fast, especially when it involves retired cops, family tragedies, and whispers about unstable behavior. What I didn't expect was how quickly the narrative would turn against me, or how methodically Rachel had been poisoning community opinion. It started with subtle changes at places I'd frequented for years. Tony's Hardware, where I'd bought supplies for home projects since retiring. Maria's Mexican Cafe, where Margaret and I used to eat Sunday breakfast. The Fry's grocery store, where checkout clerks had known me by name for over a decade. Suddenly, familiar faces offered awkward nods instead of warm greetings. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. People who used to linger for friendly chat now completed their business quickly and moved away. Then Detective Maria Santos, one of my former training officers who'd worked under my command for 8 years, called me at home. "Wesley, I'm hearing concerning reports. People are saying you're struggling with Jake's situation, making wild accusations." "What kind of accusations?" "That you're claiming Rachel is somehow involved in the accident. That you're harassing hospital staff, demanding access to records you shouldn't have, following people around town." She paused. "Wesley, some witnesses report seeing you at the casino, taking pictures of Dr. Torres. That's not normal grieving behavior." The pieces clicked with sickening clarity. Rachel wasn't just planning Jake's murder. She was systematically destroying my credibility as a witness. Every move I'd made to investigate had been anticipated, reframed, weaponized against me. "Maria, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." "I am listening. But Wesley, grief can make people see conspiracies where none exist. It can make rational people behave irrationally." "This isn't grief-induced paranoia. I have documented evidence. Digital forensics, financial records, witness statements, medical record tampering. Rachel and Dr. Torres are actively planning to kill my son." Silence stretched across the phone line like desert highway. "Wesley, do you hear yourself? These are serious accusations against a grieving wife and a respected physician. Dr. Torres has been practicing medicine at St. Mary's for 12 years. Rachel works at a marketing firm. They're not criminal masterminds." I was losing her. Worse, if I'd lost Maria, someone who'd worked closely with me, who knew my investigative skills and professional judgment, then I'd lost the entire police department's credibility. "Will you at least look at the evidence I've gathered?" "Wesley, I can't open an official investigation based on suspicions and circumstantial observations. You know how this works. We need probable cause, not theories." After she hung up, I understood the brilliant simplicity of Rachel's strategy. She'd positioned me as the unstable, grieving father whose judgment had been compromised by trauma and loss. Any evidence I presented would be filtered through that narrative. The desperate delusions of a man who couldn't accept that sometimes terrible things just happen randomly. My neighbors began avoiding eye contact when I checked the mail. Former colleagues stopped returning phone calls. The pharmacy, where I'd picked up Margaret's cancer medications for years, started treating me with cautious professionalism instead of the warm familiarity of shared struggle. Rachel had isolated me socially, professionally, and legally before making her final move, but she'd made one crucial miscalculation in her otherwise perfect plan. She'd underestimated how far a father would go to save his son, and how much a retired cop would risk to prevent murder. The hospital conference room smelled like industrial coffee and life-or-death decisions, with undertones of industrial disinfectant and the subtle anxiety that permeates places where families receive devastating news. Dr. Torres sat across the polished table from me, hands folded professionally, while Rachel dabbed at her eyes with tissues that never seemed to absorb actual tears. Mr. Parker, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we need to discuss Jake's long-term prognosis and treatment options. 8 days since the accident. 8 days of watching machines breathe for my son while his wife and doctor orchestrated his murder with the patience of professional killers. His brain activity has shown no meaningful improvement over the past week, Dr. Torres continued, consulting a manila folder filled with what I now knew were deliberately falsified reports. The follow-up scans indicate severe, likely irreversible damage to critical brain structures. We need to consider quality of life issues and realistic expectations. Rachel leaned forward, her performance pitch perfect. Wesley, I can't bear to see him suffer like this. Jake was always so active, so alive. He wouldn't want to live connected to machines, existing in some vegetative state. The medical consensus, Dr. Torres added with practiced gravity, is that continuing aggressive treatment may not be in Jake's best medical interest. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is allow natural processes to take their course. I studied his face. The same man who'd lost $3,200 in a casino parking lot 3 nights ago. The same physician who'd modified medical records to hide evidence of Jake's consciousness. The same doctor who was gambling away money he didn't have while planning to murder my son for insurance money. What exactly are you recommending, doctor? Transitioning to comfort care, making Jake as peaceful as possible while allowing his body to follow its natural course, without artificial life support prolonging what appears to be an irreversible situation. You're talking about disconnecting the ventilator, I translated. Rachel reached across the table with perfectly calculated timing. Wesley, I know this is the hardest decision any parent could face, but we have to think about what Jake would truly want. Would he want to be kept alive artificially when there's no real hope of recovery? What Jake would want was to live. What Jake would want was justice for the people systematically planning his murder. What Jake would want was his father to protect him when he couldn't protect himself. I need time to consider this decision. Dr. Torres glanced at Rachel, quick, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. The shared look of co-conspirators, whose timeline was being disrupted. Of course we understand your need for time, Dr. Torres said, but Mr. Parker, from a medical standpoint, prolonging this situation indefinitely isn't beneficial for anyone. It's difficult to watch someone you love in this condition, and it's costly for everyone involved. The money reference wasn't accidental. They were pressuring me from every angle, emotional, medical, financial. How long do I have to make this decision? There's no official deadline, Rachel said softly. But Dr. Torres thinks it might be cruel to keep Jake like this much longer. As I left the conference room, I caught Rachel and Dr. Torres exchanging another look. Not the shared concern of medical professional and grieving spouse, but the frustrated glance of conspirators whose carefully planned timeline was encountering unexpected resistance. They wanted Jake dead quickly before he could wake up and identify his would-be killers, before their medical records tampering could be discovered through external investigation, before their financial motives became obvious to law enforcement, before their casino meetings and gambling debts created an investigative trail. I had perhaps 24 hours before they pressured me into signing papers that would legally authorize the murder of my son. 24 hours to find evidence solid enough to involve law enforcement. 24 hours to save Jake's life and expose the people trying to kill him. 24 hours to prove that sometimes conspiracy theories are just conspiracy facts that haven't been prosecuted yet. I called Maria from my truck in the hospital parking lot, Phoenix skyline glowing orange in the late afternoon sun like a desert sunset, painted by someone who'd never seen hope die slowly in fluorescent hospital lighting. Maria, I need to ask you something as a friend, not as a former colleague or superior officer. Can we meet somewhere private? Wesley, I'm not asking for official police resources or departmental involvement. I'm asking for 30 minutes of your time to review evidence that my son is about to be murdered by his wife and her accomplice. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might hang up. 30 minutes. But Wesley, if this is what I think it is, then judge the evidence, not the messenger. An hour later, we sat in my truck behind a closed Circle K on the outskirts of Phoenix, the city lights beginning to twinkle like earthbound stars. I'd chosen the location carefully, public enough to be safe, private enough for serious conversation, familiar enough that Maria wouldn't feel ambushed. I'm going to show you evidence of premeditated murder, I began, not theories, not grief-driven suspicions, not the desperate delusions of a father who can't accept tragedy. Hard evidence of criminal conspiracy. I handed her my phone loaded with photos of Jake's search history, the medical record modifications, the insurance policy changes, the timestamps proving Rachel's presence at the hospital before the accident was reported, the documentation of Dr. Torres's gambling debts and secret meetings with Rachel. Maria scrolled through everything in silence, her expression shifting from skeptical patience to focused attention to growing alarm. When she finished, she set the phone down carefully. Wesley, this is criminal conspiracy to commit murder. Yes. If this evidence is authentic, every piece is documented with timestamps, sources, and chain of custody procedures. I may be retired, but I haven't forgotten how to build a prosecutable case. Maria stared out at the desert horizon where the last traces of daylight were fading into star-filled darkness. This would require search warrants to access hospital computer logs, financial institution records, casino surveillance footage. We'd need probable cause for a judge. What probable cause do you need beyond documented evidence of murder conspiracy? Evidence gathered by a civilian with personal involvement in the case. Defense attorneys would challenge every piece of this in court. I understood her position. Police departments don't initiate major investigations based on retired officers' private detective work, especially when those officers have obvious emotional investment in the outcomes. Maria, in approximately 6 hours, I'll be back in that conference room. They'll pressure me to authorize discontinuing life support. Once those machines are disconnected, Jake dies, and all the evidence in the world won't bring him back. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing legal procedures against moral obligations. What exactly do you need from me? Unofficial surveillance on Rachel and Dr. Torres tonight. Document their movements, their communications, their behavior. If we can record them discussing the plan, that's asking me to conduct unauthorized surveillance using department resources for a case that doesn't officially exist. My son's life is worth the risk. Maria started her car, headlights cutting through desert darkness. I'll see what I can do unofficially. But Wesley, if you're wrong about this, if I'm wrong, I'm a grieving father whose imagination ran wild with coincidences. If I'm right, we prevent premeditated murder and expose a conspiracy that could have killed other patients. As she drove away, I realized I'd gained a potential ally but lost my safety net. If Maria couldn't find independent corroborating evidence quickly enough, I'd have to make an impossible choice: sign the papers and watch my son die legally, or refuse and give Rachel and Dr. Torres justification to find another method of murder. Either way, time was running out like sand through an hourglass measured in heartbeats and ventilator cycles. But for the first time in 8 days, I wasn't fighting completely alone. Linda Bennett's house sat in an older Phoenix neighborhood where desert landscaping mixed with 30-year-old shade trees and the kind of architectural simplicity that suggested people who valued substance over style. Modest homes built for middle-class families, maintained with the pride of people who'd worked for everything they owned. I'd called ahead, asking if we could talk privately about Jake's care and my concerns about his treatment timeline. She'd agreed immediately, with the kind of urgency that suggested she'd been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. She opened the door before I could knock, like she'd been watching through the window. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Parker. I've been hoping you'd come. Please, come in." Her living room reflected 25 years of caring for other people. Comfortable furniture chosen for durability rather than style, medical journals stacked beside a well-worn recliner, photos of grandchildren scattered across surfaces, with the casual abundance of someone whose greatest joy came from family connections. You warned me to watch and listen the night I arrived, I said, settling into a chair that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. What did you see that made you think something was wrong? Linda poured coffee from a pot that had been waiting for my arrival, her hands trembling slightly with what I now recognized as suppressed knowledge rather than age-related infirmity. Mr. Parker, in 25 years of nursing, I've seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. I've seen genuine grief, desperate hope, complicated family dynamics, medical decisions that tear people apart. But what I observed with your dummy daughter-in-law, she paused, choosing her words with care. It didn't feel authentic. She sat across from me, coffee cup cradled in both hands like a shield against uncomfortable truths. The night Jake was admitted, I was working a double shift to cover for a colleague. Around 1:45 a.m., a full 45 minutes before the accident was reported to emergency services, I saw Rachel in our hospital parking lot. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. She was on her cell phone, pacing beside her car, obviously agitated. I remember checking my watch because I needed to be back inside for 2:15 medication rounds. But Mr. Parker, the emergency call about Jake's accident didn't come in until 2:30 a.m. You're certain about the timing? Absolutely. I documented my break time in the nursing log, standard procedure. Rachel was at the hospital before anyone officially knew there had been an accident. Linda reached for her purse and pulled out her cell phone with the deliberate motion of someone who'd been planning this conversation. But that's not the worst part, Mr. Parker. 3 nights ago, I was finishing late documentation when I heard voices in the family conference room. Rachel and Dr. Torres were having what they thought was a private conversation. She pressed play, and Rachel's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakably cold. How much longer do we have to maintain this charade? Every day Jake remains unconscious increases the risk of him waking up and remembering what really happened. Torres. The father is being unreasonably stubborn about the life support decision. We need to move to the alternative plan we discussed. Rachel. Which alternative? The medication adjustment or the more direct approach? Torres. I can modify his sedation protocol tonight, increase the dosage to levels that will cause respiratory depression. It'll appear to be natural complications from brain swelling. Rachel. How long until it takes effect? Torres. 6 to 8 hours maximum. His breathing will become shallow, then stop. We'll document it as expected progression of traumatic brain injury. Rachel. And the insurance investigation? Torres. Clean death from documented medical complications. No suspicious circumstances. The payout should be processed within 30 days. The recording lasted 6 minutes. 6 minutes of 2 people casually planning murder, while my son lay unconscious 20 feet away, trusting medical professionals to preserve his life rather than end it for money. Linda, why didn't you take this recording to hospital administration immediately? Dr. Torres is department head. He has connections throughout the hospital administration, relationships with board members, influence over nursing schedules and employment decisions. But more than that, she paused, fear evident in her voice. Rachel confronted me the next morning, said she'd seen me near the conference room, asked if I'd overheard their private family discussion. When I said no, she smiled and mentioned how difficult it would be for a nurse my age to find new employment if there were questions about my professional judgment. She threatened you. Subtly but effectively, after 25 years at St. Ed. Mary's, I can't afford to lose my job or my reputation, but Mr. Parker, I also can't stand by while they murder a patient under my care. Will you testify officially? In court? If you can guarantee protection from retaliation, yes, but they're planning to act tonight. That recording was made yesterday evening. 12 hours. Jake had less than 12 hours to live unless I found a way to stop them. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had proof that would convince law enforcement, evidence that would hold up in court, testimony from a credible witness who could corroborate everything I'd discovered. Linda Bennett had just provided the final piece of the puzzle. Now I had to use it before my son died from natural complications that were actually premeditated murder. Maria Santos met me in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Phoenix. the neon sign casting pink and blue light across her face as she handed me a recording device no larger than a matchbox. "This is completely unofficial, Wesley. If this operation goes wrong, neither of us was ever here." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Linda would wear the transmitter during her night shift, positioned to record any conversations between Rachel and Dr. Torres about their timeline for Jake's murder. The device would transmit to a receiver I'd carry while parked outside the hospital. "The range is about 200 yards through hospital walls," Maria explained. "Stay in the visitor parking area, monitor the frequency, and document everything. If they discuss specific plans to harm Jake tonight, we'll have probable cause for emergency intervention." At 10:45 p.m., I sat in my truck across from Mary's main entrance, wearing headphones connected to the receiver, while watching the hospital's fourth-floor ICU windows. Linda's voice came through clearly. She was at the central nursing station completing normal end-of-shift documentation. 11:32 p.m., footsteps, a door closing, voices becoming clearer. "Linda? I wanted to check on Jake's status before heading home." Rachel's voice performed concern masking underlying tension. "His condition remains stable. No significant changes in the past 12 hours. And his father? Wesley seemed agitated during our family meeting today." I held my breath, knowing Linda was about to walk into dangerous territory. "Mr. Parker loves his son very much. This situation is incredibly difficult for him." "Of course. But Linda, I hope you understand that family medical decisions can be complicated. Sometimes outside perspectives, even well-meaning ones, can interfere with what's medically appropriate." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "I understand my role as Jake's nurse is to provide the best possible medical care." "Exactly. And sometimes the best care means recognizing when further intervention becomes counterproductive." 11:47 p.m., Dr. Torres' voice joining the conversation. "Ladies, how are we doing tonight?" "Dr. Torres, I was just discussing Jake's care with Linda. She understands the importance of following appropriate medical protocols." A pause. Then Torres. "Linda, could you give Mrs. Parker and me a few minutes to discuss her husband's treatment plan?" "Of course." Footsteps. A door closing. Now I was listening to what they thought was a private conversation between conspirators. "Kevin, we can't wait much longer. Wesley's asking too many questions, and I think that old nurse suspects something." "What makes you think Linda suspects anything?" "She's been watching me too closely, asking subtle questions about my medical knowledge. Tonight she seemed nervous when I mentioned family decisions." "Do you think she overheard us discussing the medication protocol?" "It's possible. But even if she did, who would believe accusations from a nurse against a department head physician and a grieving wife?" Torres. "Still, we should move tonight. I can adjust his sedation levels during the 3 a.m. medication round. Increase the dosage to suppress respiratory function. It'll appear to be natural decline from brain injury." "How long?" 4 to 6 hours. His breathing will gradually weaken, then stop. We'll document it as expected progression of traumatic complications. And if Wesley demands an autopsy, the sedation levels will have metabolized by then. Cause of death will be respiratory failure secondary to traumatic brain injury. Standard progression for severe head trauma patients. What about the insurance investigation? Clean medical death from documented injuries, no suspicious circumstances. They'll process the claim within standard timelines. I had it. Complete confession of planned murder, recorded with timestamp documentation, legally admissible evidence of premeditated conspiracy. But Jake had less than 4 hours to live. I called Maria. "Emergency. They're implementing the murder plan tonight. 3 a.m. medication round. I have everything recorded." I'm mobilizing backup and requesting emergency court intervention. Wesley, keep that recording secure and get to the station immediately. As I started my truck, Linda's voice crackled through the headphones one final time. "Mr. Parker, if you're monitoring this transmission, they know I was listening at the conference room door. I'm going to position myself near Jake's room tonight, but you need to get help immediately. They're planning to kill him in less than 4 hours." The drive to Maria's station felt like the longest 12 minutes of my life. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had evidence that would convince any judge, any jury, any law enforcement officer who heard those voices casually planning murder. Rachel and Dr. Torres had just provided the rope for their own legal hanging. Phoenix Superior Court Judge Michael Harrison was definitely not pleased about being awakened at 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night, but Maria Santos presented evidence that made sleep impossible for anyone with a functioning conscience and respect for the law. I waited in the courthouse hallway while Maria, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, and Judge Harrison reviewed Linda's recording, my compiled digital evidence, and the financial documentation that established clear motive. The building felt hollow at this hour, our voices echoing through corridors designed for justice, but rarely hosting emergency interventions to prevent murders. At 2:23 a.m., Judge Harrison emerged from his chambers with signed paperwork that would either save my son's life or expose the depth of the conspiracy trying to kill him. Emergency injunction preventing any changes to Jake Parker's medical treatment without court supervision. Search warrants for Dr. Torres's financial records, computer access logs, and hospital administrative privileges. Arrest warrants for Rachel Parker and Dr. Kevin Torres on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and medical malpractice. But the clock was still ticking toward 3 a.m. when Torres planned to administer the lethal dose of sedatives that would murder my son while appearing to be natural medical complications. We raced back to St. Mary's with a police escort, 3 squad cars, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the desert night like electronic screams of urgency. Maria coordinated with hospital security while uniformed officers positioned at all exits, elevator banks, and stairwells. I followed her to the ICU, my heart pounding with the rhythm of someone whose entire world depended on arriving in time. Jake's room was empty. The bed was still there, machines still running, but no patient. "Where is he?" I demanded of the night nurse at the central monitoring station. She checked her computer with obvious confusion. "Room 314 was transferred to Radiology Suite B for emergency brain imaging. Dr. Torres ordered the scans 23 minutes ago." Maria grabbed her radio. "All units, locate Dr. Torres and patient Jake Parker immediately. Consider this a medical emergency with potential for foul play." We found them in Radiology Suite B, a room designed for emergency imaging procedures, but currently serving as an attempted murder scene. Dr. Torres stood beside Jake's gurney, a syringe filled with clear liquid in his right hand. The imaging machines weren't running. No medical scans were being performed. No legitimate medical procedures were taking place. This was execution disguised as healthcare. "Phoenix Police, step away from the patient immediately." Maria's weapon was drawn, trained on Torres with the steady grip of someone who'd practiced this moment hundreds of times at the shooting range. Dr. Torres looked up, syringe still in hand, his expression shifting from professional confidence to panic. "This is a legitimate medical procedure. You have no authority to interfere with patient care. Dr. Kevin Torres, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and violation of medical ethics." The syringe hit the floor, its contents spreading across linoleum in a puddle that represented my son's life spreading away from death. As officers handcuffed Dr. Torres, I rushed to Jake's side. The ventilator was functioning normally, monitors showing stable vital signs, IV lines clear and uncontaminated. Whatever had been in that syringe, whatever Torres had planned to inject directly into Jake's bloodstream, hadn't reached my son's circulatory system. "Where's Rachel?" I asked Maria while checking Jake's monitors for any signs of previous tampering. Unit 2 found her in the parking lot, attempting to leave the state with 3 suitcases and $15,000 in cash. She's in custody. Linda Bennett appeared at the radiology room door, still wearing the recording device, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who just helped prevent a murder. "He's safe now, Mr. Parker. They can't hurt him anymore." As they wheeled Jake back to ICU under police protection, back to the machines that were legitimately keeping him alive, back to the safety of medical professionals who'd sworn to do no harm rather than profit from causing it, I realized something profound. For the first time in 9 days, my son was truly safe. The people planning his murder were in custody. The conspiracy had been exposed and documented. Justice was finally possible. 4 days after Rachel and Dr. Torres were arrested, I was dozing in the chair beside Jake's bed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of nearly losing him and then fighting to save him, when I heard the sound that changed everything. "Dad?" His voice was hoarse from the ventilator tube that had been removed 6 hours earlier, barely above a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard in 62 years of living. Jake's eyes were open, focused, aware, tracking my movement as I leaned forward. "Hey, son." I reached for his hand and his fingers squeezed back, weak but deliberate, purposeful, alive. Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd taken over Jake's care after Dr. Torres's arrest, entered the room with obvious amazement. "Jake, this is remarkable progress. Can you tell me your name?" "Jake Parker." The words came out clear, certain, no confusion or disorientation. "Do you remember what happened to you?" Jake's face clouded as memory returned. "Car accident." "But Dad..." He looked directly at me, his eyes sharp with understanding. "It wasn't an accident. Rachel deliberately swerved into the oncoming truck." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Rachel hadn't just planned to murder Jake through medical manipulation. She'd already attempted to kill him once through the staged accident, positioning herself in the passenger seat to minimize her own injuries while ensuring Jake absorbed the fatal impact. "She said she was sorry," Jake continued, his voice getting stronger with each sentence. "Right before she yanked the steering wheel hard left. Said it was nothing personal, just business." Dr. Chen documented everything Jake remembered while Detective Maria Santos took his official statement. Each detail confirmed what we'd proven through digital evidence and recorded confessions, but now we had the victim's own testimony about the attempted murder. "Jake, do you remember anything about your time in the hospital?" I asked. "Fragments. I could hear voices sometimes, but I couldn't respond. I remember feeling frustrated, like I was trapped inside my own body." He paused. "Dad, I heard Rachel talking to someone about disconnecting life support. I tried to wake up, tried to move, but nothing worked." Over the following days, Jake's recovery progressed with speed that amazed his medical team. The brain swelling that had threatened his life continued reducing. Physical therapy helped him regain strength in his limbs. Speech therapy addressed the minor effects of his brain injury. The doctors used words like remarkable and exceptional to describe his healing. I called it justice finally being served. But the real miracle wasn't medical. It was watching my son return to himself. His humor during physical therapy sessions, his gratitude toward Linda Bennett and the nursing staff who'd protected him, his fundamental decency that Rachel had tried so hard to destroy for money. "Dad," he said one afternoon while working on coordination exercises, "thank you for not giving up on me." "Son, giving up on you was never an option. But you could have signed those papers. You could have believed their medical recommendations." "Jake, a father's job is to protect his children, even when they can't protect themselves, especially then." 3 weeks after waking up, Jake was discharged from the hospital with minimal permanent effects from his brain injury, some short-term memory issues that were already improving, and a deeper appreciation for the people who'd fought to save his life. As we drove home together, he looked out at the Phoenix skyline and said, "Dad, I want to understand everything you did to save me. Every piece of evidence you found, every person you convinced to help." "Why?" "Because someone else's family might need that same kind of protection someday." Phoenix is indeed a small community masquerading as a big city, and news travels fast, especially when it involves retired cops, family betrayal, medical conspiracies, and the kind of justice that restores faith in human decency. The same neighbors who'd avoided me during Rachel's smear campaign now stopped by with apologies, casseroles, and genuine shame about how quickly they'd believed lies over decades of knowing my character. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down brought homemade cookies and tears. "Wesley, I'm so sorry we doubted you. We should have known better." The grocery store where I'd felt unwelcome welcomed me back with awkward but heartfelt warmth. Tony at the hardware store pulled me aside to say, "I never believed those stories about you losing your mind, Wesley. I just didn't know how to help." Former colleagues from Phoenix PD called to congratulate me, on outstanding detective work under impossible circumstances. The narrative had completely flipped, from unstable grieving father to retired hero cop saves son's life through brilliant investigation. But the redemption that mattered most came from unexpected sources. Linda Bennett received recognition from the Arizona Nursing Association for extraordinary courage in protecting patient safety, but she deflected praise back to the importance of trusting professional instincts when something feels wrong. Maria Santos was promoted to detective sergeant, partly based on her work in breaking up the hospital murder conspiracy, but she consistently credited our collaboration as an example of how law enforcement should work with concerned citizens who present credible evidence. The local television news covered the story with the respect and detail it deserved. Retired police captain exposes hospital murder plot, but they focused equally on Linda Bennett's courage, Maria Santos's professional judgment, and the systemic failures that had allowed Dr. Torres to abuse his medical authority. Phoenix rallied around the broader implications, not just the father who wouldn't give up and the nurse who risked everything, but the importance of questioning medical authority when financial incentives might compromise patient care. St. Mary's Hospital implemented new policies for monitoring high-risk insurance cases, tracking unusual modifications to patient records, and providing protection for healthcare workers who report suspicious activities. But for me, the only validation that truly mattered came from Jake himself. "Dad, I've been thinking about what happened, and I realized something important." "What's that?" "This experience showed me who I could trust when everything went wrong. It showed me what family really means, and it showed me the kind of man my father is." "Jake, any parent would have done the same thing." "No, Dad. Any parent would have wanted to do the same thing, but not every parent would have had the skills, the persistence, or the courage to actually accomplish it. You saved my life by refusing to accept that sometimes bad things just happen randomly." And the Phoenix community's opinion mattered less than Jake's recovery, but it felt good to walk through my neighborhood without whispers following me, to shop for groceries without suspicious glances, to have my phone ring with calls from people who wanted to reconnect rather than avoid me. Rachel's systematic campaign to destroy my credibility had failed completely. The truth had emerged stronger than her lies. Justice had prevailed over conspiracy, and my family, what was left of it, was whole again. 8 months later, Phoenix Superior Court was packed for Rachel Parker's sentencing hearing, with Jake sitting beside me in the front row, fully recovered and ready to face the woman who'd tried to kill him, twice for money. Judge Harrison reviewed the case with obvious disgust, consulting documents that detailed a level of premeditation and callousness that had shocked even experienced prosecutors. Mrs. Parker, you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to murder your husband for financial gain. You caused a motor vehicle accident intended to kill him. When that failed, you manipulated medical professionals, falsified insurance documents, and attempted to have him murdered in a hospital while he lay helpless and unconscious. Rachel sat at the defendant's table in orange jail coveralls, no longer the composed woman who'd played the grieving wife so convincingly. Her attorney had negotiated a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but the evidence against her was so overwhelming that life imprisonment had been inevitable. You showed complete disregard for human life, abused the trust of medical institutions, and demonstrated a level of premeditation that represents the worst of human nature driven by greed. The prosecution had presented evidence that this wasn't Rachel's first attempt at insurance fraud murder. Investigation into her background revealed a previous marriage in Colorado that had ended with her husband's suspicious death in a skiing accident. That case was being reopened based on similar patterns of behavior. The court sentences you to life in prison without possibility of parole. Dr. Kevin Torres, who testified against Rachel in exchange for a reduced sentence, received 20 years for his role in the conspiracy. His medical license was permanently revoked, his gambling debts the catalyst for betraying everything he'd sworn to protect. "Your Honor," Jake said, standing to address the court, "I'd like to speak directly to Mrs. Parker." Judge Harrison nodded. The victim has the right to address the defendant. Jake faced the woman who'd shared his bed while planning his death, who'd promised to love and honor him while researching methods to kill him for money. Rachel, you took away my ability to trust people, my sense of security in my own home, my belief that the person closest to me would keep me safe rather than harm me. But you didn't destroy my life, and you didn't destroy my family. You taught me that love is stronger than greed, that some people will risk everything to protect others, and that truth eventually emerges, no matter how carefully lies are constructed. Rachel never looked up, never acknowledged his words, never showed remorse for attempting to murder someone who'd loved and trusted her completely. I forgive you, Jake concluded, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying hatred would give you power over my life that you don't deserve to have. As we left the courthouse together, Jake put his arm around my shoulders. Dad, ready to go home and start the next chapter? More than ready, son. Media coverage focused on the successful prosecution, the exposure of medical system vulnerabilities, and the importance of family members who refuse to accept suspicious circumstances without investigation. But for me, walking out of that courthouse with my son alive and healthy beside me, the only thing that mattered was that justice had been served, truth had prevailed over conspiracy, and our family had survived the worst that greed and betrayal could inflict. 6 months after the trial, Jake and I sat on my back porch, watching the Phoenix sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of orange and purple that reminded me why I'd chosen to retire in Arizona rather than somewhere with easier winters. It was the same view I'd contemplated while my son lay unconscious, the same sky that had watched over our family's darkest hours. But everything was different now. You know what this whole experience taught me? Jake said, sipping iced tea made the way Margaret used to prepare it. Strong enough to wake the dead. Sweet enough to make life bearable. What's that? Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong about a medical situation, it probably is wrong. When financial incentives might compromise patient care, ask hard questions. And never underestimate how far people will go when large amounts of money are involved. The investigation had revealed that medical fraud targeting vulnerable families happens far more often than anyone wants to admit. Insurance policies get manipulated. Medical decisions get influenced by greed rather than patient welfare. Unconscious patients become targets for people who see tragedy as financial opportunity. But it also revealed something more hopeful. The power of ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice, who trust their instincts when authority figures tell them to ignore obvious warning signs. Linda Bennett had returned to work with new protocols designed to protect patients from internal threats. She'd been instrumental in developing training programs that help healthcare workers recognize and report suspicious behavior that might compromise patient safety. Maria Santos continued rising through the ranks of Phoenix PD, using our collaboration as a model for how law enforcement should respond when concerned citizens present credible evidence of criminal activity. Jake had started a foundation to help families navigate medical crises without falling prey to predators who see insurance policies and vulnerable patients as profit opportunities. The foundation provided resources for families to understand their rights, document concerning behaviors, and access legal assistance when medical situations seem suspicious. Dad, what would you tell other families who might be facing something similar to what we went through? I thought about the question as the last light faded from the desert sky, considering everything we'd learned about protecting the people we love from those who would harm them for money. Trust your instincts above all else. Document everything that seems unusual. Find allies among people with professional expertise. Never give up on the people you love, even when authority figures tell you to accept what appears to be inevitable. And remember that sometimes conspiracy theories are just conspiracy facts that haven't been prosecuted yet. And if they feel like everyone thinks they're crazy for questioning what seems obvious to everyone else, then they're probably on the right track. The best conspiracies hide in plain sight, protected by people's reluctance to believe that trusted institutions might be compromised by greed. As darkness settled over Phoenix, I realized that our story had become something larger than one family's struggle against criminal conspiracy. It had become a reminder that ordinary people have the power to protect each other when systems fail, that love really is stronger than greed, and that truth emerges when people refuse to accept comfortable lies. Jake squeezed my shoulder. "Thanks for saving my life, Dad. Thanks for being worth saving, son." If you've ever sensed something wasn't right about a medical situation involving someone you love, what specific signs made you suspicious? And have you witnessed the kind of strength that families can find when they absolutely refuse to accept injustice, even when everyone around them suggests they should? If this story resonated with you, watch when a nurse discovered her colleague was killing patients, and the detective who solved his own son's murder. Two more stories about ordinary people who refuse to let evil hide behind professional authority and institutional trust.